we're excited to have as our guest today, Noe Santiago from Kindred at Home. So first, if you would, Noe, please tell us about our listeners about your role at Kindred at Home and a little bit about yourself.
Sounds good. Hi, everybody. This is Noe Santiago. I wear several hats with Kindred at Home. One is definitely a hat where I am a physical therapist. I do still see patients in their homes, and which is actually a very rewarding thing for me because, being able to see people in their homes kind of keeps it still real to me.
Absolutely.
I also work in the office, so I'm a little bit of a paper pusher that way, but the key there is that, what excites me a lot about that is that I actually get to work with patients kind of on another level where I'm actually helping the caregivers give as good of a care as they can with our patients. So that's basically my role in the office, is that I'm actually doing a lot of administrative type things. And one of the roles that I have too is as a marketer. So I'm out there with a lot of the marketers for Kindred at Home, or we call them our home health liaisons. Yes. And it ends up being very rewarding in that way because I get to, it feels really good to be able to open up these new accounts and be able to work with great companies such as yourself. So yeah, definitely a very exciting part of my job too. Yes.
Well, it's neat. We have coffee every morning to get to know each other a little bit and go over the outline of the show. And it was great to get to know Noe and some of the other Kindred folks here recently. So it's great to have you here.
Thank you.
And thank you for what you do for our senior community. What are, let's start off with, we see this every day. Okay. Can you give our audience an idea of what some of the costs are associated with falling?
Yes. So, when everybody thinks about costs, a lot of us think about costs in terms of money. And I do have some money figures here, but, there's definitely a different type of cost that I'll kind of elaborate on a little bit more. So adjusted for inflation, the direct medical cost for fall injuries is approximately $31 billion annually. Falls do account for 70% of accidental deaths in persons 75 years old or older. 54% of those fatal falls occur inside the home, mostly in the bathroom.
Sure.
1 of every 3 people 65 and older will actually fall each year. Besides the monetary costs, we actually have to think about the cost to the person falling, but not only them, but to their loved ones too. Imagine, where a person, a loved one falls, you're worried to death about them. They end up coming home. They're not maybe as mobile as they used to be.
Right.
So having, being able to have a family member always there. And let's face it, a lot of the family members we, all have a life.
Right.
They have their own families. So they get in a position where, it's really difficult to be able to not only manage their own lives, but the lives of their loved ones. So we were kind of talking about this over coffee this morning, and I see a high amount of burnout with caregivers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's the sandwich generation that's getting fried.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. So, and thinking about cost too, I don't know if you've ever known anybody or yourselves, even in the audience, if you've ever been to the hospital, if you've ever gotten a bill from being in the hospital, it is amazing. It's like I went to the hospital because of a little bit of a heart palpitation, and it looked like, thank goodness for insurance, right? But
right.
I could have paid for a small car with the amount of money that I spent, or that my insurance spent over there over 2 days.
Sure.
So, it's all about prevention. It really is.
Well, and the trip to the emergency room is even more than the small car.
Totally.
I think that's like a Ferrari or something.
Yeah. You're so right. You're so right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
now, if someone is on taking some medications such as blood thinner and a fall occurs, that takes it to another level, right?
Absolutely.
It's the risk.
Absolutely. So, there's a lot of blood thinners out there. They actually have blood thinners now. It's really neat how medicine really progresses. There's blood thinners that you don't have to necessarily get a stick to see how thin your blood is. But the bottom line is still thin.
Right.
So, the thinner it is, unfortunately, you even brush against something or bump something, you end up with a bruise. Or a lot of the people that we see at home, after they've had like several IV sticks, you see that their arms are just black and blue when they come home, because it's just so thin. It's going in between like the skin and the muscle plane there. Yeah, so it definitely, stakes are high. I mean, and obviously, if you were to fall, and scrape something, the chance of prolonged bleeding can get pretty messy. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
Right.
And what are some of the misconceptions with falling?
So, the audience that we actually work with the most are older adults. Now, what I define as an older adult is a person 65 years or better. So that being said, as I said before, 1 out of every 3 people over the age of 65, unfortunately, will fall down. And this is really when we actually talk with our clients or patients, the common misconception is that they'll all say, well, I am 70 something or 80 something years old. It was meant to happen. It's just a part of aging. And that is so untrue. The biggest problem I feel with when it comes to falling is that, sure, when you fall down, what happens? You end up getting really scared about falling again. So what do? You don't move. You don't end up, and when you don't move, what happens? You end up getting weaker. You get weaker, more frail. And then what happens again? You fall. And then what happens from there? You end up getting more scared. So as you see there, it becomes more of a downward spiral. Vicious downward spiral. Absolutely, Kathy. Yeah.
I think not only that, but think of people who are because of medication, it ends up impairing their balance.
Yes. Leah, you bring up a really good point.
Even like the blood pressure medication makes you feel dizzy.
Yeah.
And as we get a little bit older and our eyesight is off a little bit, then seeing the stairs and stuff,
Yes. And to your point, Jeanette, a lot of one of the things that we like to look at are the medications. You look at one of your pill bottles. What does the pill bottle say? May cause dizziness, or may cause, or don't drive when you're taking this medicine, or operate heavy machinery. And that's just one medicine. Now imagine again, when we see people in their homes, we're talking about over 10 medications typically.
Goodness.
And, they say that you're actually statistically more likely to fall if you're just taking 4 or more medicines.
Wow.
So, and that would be the role of a person helping out in the house, is that, you would definitely want to take into account all of those medications. And, what we typically do is we run what they call a medication interaction report. So I'll give you an example. One of our clients' patients, he fell twice before we walked into the door.
Wow.
So his face was black and blue. He was taking Coumadin, one of the blood thinners. And they were wondering why. His legs would just give out underneath him. Well, we found out after doing a medication interaction report, we saw that he was taking a heart medication to control the rhythm of his heart, as well as one of several blood pressure medications. And we saw that one of those interactions causes the heart rate to go down. Lo and behold, we take his heart rate. His heart rate was in the 40s.
Oh my gosh.
So, when we see things like that, we call the doctor right away, because, and you see it in healthcare all the time. You go to the hospital, or you have several specialties working with you. You have one doctor telling you this, you have another doctor telling you that. And all of a sudden you've got all these medications that are not necessarily accounted for. So that's where, whoever is, kind of working with the person in the home, that's why it's so important for us to really know what's going on from the medication standpoint, because there really is so much, that can really interact there. Yeah.
Even like taking vitamins with some of the medications.
Yes, some of these supplements, it's amazing, what these supplements can really do. Yeah.
What does a person who's at higher risk of falling look like? Is there kind of a profile that you could?
So, and I'm sure, people in the audience definitely, I want you to really think about that too, because, sometimes you get this gut feeling about certain people, like, they don't look really steady to me. And what I've found, at least in my journeys or working with patients over the years, is that, typically a person who is more likely to fall tends to be a little slower when they walk. So if you've ever maybe held the door open for somebody and, you're just thinking, and, not wanting to be rude or anything, but you're thinking of yourself, wow, this person's actually kind of taken a while to get to the door or through or into the elevator. That typically is a sign. In fact, it's a well-studied subject, actually, that, if you walk a little slower, now for us, because we're so technical in our line of work, it's 2 feet per second. If you actually walk less than 2 feet per second, what ends up happening is your chance of falling, or heck, there's a lot of studies that actually say that actually is linked to morbidity or death the slower you walk. Yeah, and you'll hear that from time to time, listening to news or watching the news. You'll hear those studies from time to time. It's kind of scary.
It is.
Yeah.
It sure is.
So yes, people who typically walk a little slower, or if you've noticed anybody that's having a little harder time getting out of bed, where you literally have to help them out, or getting out of a chair, people that have to really rock themselves to get out of a chair, they're typically a little bit more risky to fall.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I see is people using their upper body strength.
Yes.
Okay, versus their lower body strength to get up would be, I would think, a sign of somebody of
Likely to
higher
fall.
risk. Yeah.
Right. So the key there is that, it's when we see a typical profile for a patient, when we go in there and do our assessments, is that, a lot of times we see what I call substitutions. To your point, Jim, when it comes to standing up from, say, a chair that, and, maybe that chair is a little lower. Sure, a lot of people will tend to rock a little bit, use their momentum, use that upper body. And yeah, that is a definite sign of weakness in the legs. It can also mean that, the person that maybe is in a little bit of pain. And let's face it, as we get a little further from being younger, that's what happens, right? We end up getting to the point where, things are just a little more achy, things a little more stiff than usual. But the key here is that that's very reversible. Being inactive is probably your worst enemy when it comes to that. So, encouraging that activity is probably the most important thing when it comes to preventing a fall. So I would also want to add on to that, anybody that has a problem with their vision, we already talked about strength, any conditions where you have a little numbness, but particularly in your feet, or just having dizziness. And I'm talking the vertigo type of dizziness where you're standing up, you feel like the room is spinning or moving, or even lightheaded. We kind of talked about that with medications. Some of these medications can cause that lightheadedness. Yeah.
So, Noe, can you tell us what can be done to reduce the chance of falling?
So, in terms of, we definitely touched upon that. There has to be collaboration with your doctor. I hate to say this, but most people who fall down, they don't like to say anything to their loved ones or health professionals. Typically, it's a matter of, I don't want to admit that I may be losing it a little bit in terms of my independence. I don't want to be, to the point where people think, well, I don't want to end up institutionalized. I don't want to end up in a nursing home. I don't want to tell anybody that I've fallen.
Right.
But the key is when you fall, and I always tell people this, is that falling is a sign that there's something else going on. You have to be able to check under the hood, so to speak. That's where the doctor comes in. It could be a medication related problem. So, the doctor, when they take a look at you, they're going to run some blood tests. And a lot of times through these blood tests, they can find out it can be an issue with, certain medications that need to be adjusted, or it could be some sort of an infection that might be going on that you never knew about. So yeah, that's probably the number one thing I would say that would help to prevent a fall, or, prevent, from having successive falls, is to be able to contact or talk to your medical professional.
No, we were talking about this a little bit.
Sure.
As part of this reducing the risk of fall.
Yeah.
How about keep moving?
Amen.
Okay, so let's talk about that just a little bit.
So what is, leads us in maybe a segue into what is safe strides and how can it help?
Yes.
Yeah.
So Safe Strides, and this is what, probably the best part of what I do, is that Safe Strides is it's a nationally known program. It's run proprietarily by us at Kindred at Home Healthcare. And it's what I would say is a comprehensive balance program that employs both a systemic and functional approach to balance. Now, let me kind of break that down a little bit for you in layman's terms. So our balance, the way we see balance is a mixture of 4 systems. One of those systems is what we call the musculoskeletal system. So typically, if you've ever had physical therapy in the past, what do? You're working on building up your strength, maybe building up a little bit of your flexibility, maybe, having you do certain things that you haven't really done or you'd like to get back to, especially if people want to get back to work or to a certain hobby. The other things we look at beyond that, though, are a person's vision, how they're able to, see things. A lot of times, if the vision is bad, either from macular degeneration or cataracts or retinopathies, that can really affect your vision. If just imagine even walking around and all of a sudden you're just struck blind. What's the first thing we're going to want to do? We want to maybe hold on to something. And that's where I want to allude to the third portion of what balance is. A lot of it is what you feel. So imagine not being able to feel everything. People with diabetes, particularly diabetic neuropathy, they won't be able to feel everything underneath their feet. Wow. So typically, a person who presents like that, you'll notice that they probably walk around the house, they have to have their cane, or they have to have their walker, or you literally see them holding onto the walls or holding on to furniture. That's generally, there's other factors involved with that too, but a lot of times we're getting our balance through our sensation. And finally, it's our inner ear. So as we age, unfortunately, our inner ear does lose a little bit. There's tiny hair cells in the inner ear that kind of tells our brain where we are in space. And, you see typically when you see an older adult, when they're moving around, they are very stiff. Their heads are straight forward. God forbid you ask them to turn their head, or you call their attention when they're walking another way. What do you see? You see that person turning what we call an en bloc fashion, or very stiff.
Sure.
Okay? So it's kind of like the joints, in our bodies when we're talking about being active, right?
Yes.
But that inner ear sense is what tells the brain where your head is in space. So
Wow.
literally, if you don't move your head, you're actually losing that sense. And that sense, what we find typically in most of our patients that we see at home, that sense is typically not being used. So the biggest thing about Safe Strides is that we are very proud of what our outcomes are. What I mean by outcomes is that we do extensive testing when we go into a patient's home. And then we maintain that testing through treatment. And by the time we're done working with them, it's typically a 10 to 12 week course. By the time we're working with them, we get great results because we are different from a lot of, home health or typical home health or therapeutic solutions out there, because we look at the body in that sense. There's four things that really go into it, and we really address those things.
Interesting. Yeah. Now, you had mentioned that this is like a 10 to 14 week course.
Yes.
Does Medicare pay for this?
Yes, Medicare does pay for it. The key there is that Medicare, or it doesn't have to be just straight Medicare. It could be Medicare Advantage. We are actually very well recognized by Medicare. They are very aware of our results, and we've seen hundreds of thousands of patients nationwide with this approach.
Wow.
And we're always looking at how we've done, and year after year, that's what we see. We see great results coming from patients or people participating in this program. So the reason Medicare is so important, Jim, is that, a lot of times, if you have another insurance, that insurance unfortunately won't, a lot of them will tend to cut off, the services after a couple weeks.
Right.
So Medicare, and again, and them knowing what our program's about, yeah, we can see people that long and get better results. And really, study after study will definitely show that you will get better results from, balance training if you work with it longer.
Which makes, I mean, that's very much common sense. And I can
Yes.
only imagine the state, we're very excited. We have just
Mhm.
been introduced to the Safe
Yeah, we're
Strides
excited.
program
Yes.
ourselves. We're very excited to tell, and introduce it to some of our clients.
Yes.
Only because this could tremendously help hospital readmittance.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that partnership is going to be so important. A lot of times when we're done working with a patient in their home, we leave and we kind of cross our fingers thinking, okay, I hope that, a loved one or a caregiver would be able to carry this through. And having that partnership with you is going to be really important. I'm very happy and excited to be in this partnership with such a great, reputable company such as yours.
Thank you. No.
Yes.
And so how would one of our listeners go about participating in that Safe Stride program?
Excuse me. First and foremost, you definitely need to talk with your doctor. Medicare rules do state that you have to, we cannot go into your home or work with you. And again, this is in the home. We cannot work with you unless we have a doctor order. So if you are interested in a program such as this, first and foremost, see your doctor. Not only just to get the order, but see your doctor, as I've been alluding to throughout this past half hour. Having that conversation with your doctor is going to be really important. And consolidating all of those medications that you may be on. So seeing the doctor first and foremost, and then once we have the doctor order, we can actually come out and we call you and set up the time frames to come out to see you.
So does this replace the physical therapy that you might receive when you're in the hospital, or is it a continuation onto physical therapy that you've received as a result of being in the hospital?
Great question, Jeanette. The way it would work out is, yes, you typically will have therapy in the hospital or in a rehab center. And we are just more of that adjunct, that transition to care at home. I always say, when we see people in an outpatient clinic or in a rehab center, what ends up happening is we get them to be so good, but when they get home, they're dealing with their own obstacles. A lot of times they'll have chairs that are really low. A lot of times, they don't account for the fact that there are certain obstacles that you have to go around when you get in the home. And that's part of what we do, is we do a great environmental assessment, just so that, somebody doesn't find themselves in a position where they can fall because of their environment.
I'm curious, is Safe Strides a matter of something that you can do when somebody does seem to be leaning a little bit more towards being homebound all the time because of their risks of falling? Or is it something that's post-injury or post-fall that you would come in and take care of this patient?
Great question, Leah. It's all about prevention.
Okay.
So bottom line is, if you don't have to have had a fall to participate in Safe Strides. If you feel that you're maybe walking a little slower, having a little bit of a harder time getting out of chairs, taking a ton of medicines and maybe feeling a little lightheaded at times, Safe Strides is definitely for you, even if you haven't had a fall.
And I'm thinking about this because of my puppy. We all know that I have
Yeah.
a family member that's in this way. So I immediately, when you were talking about Safe Strides, I'm like, this is him all over. So I went online, I went to Google, and there is they're in Fort Myers, Florida. There
Yes.
is a Kindred at home in Fort Myers, Florida. So I've
All over the
sets
country.
going all over
Yep.
there. That's awesome.
Yes.
That is so cool. So you Kindred Home is known nationally for this Safe Stride program.
Yes.
Yeah.
As I said before, it's hundreds of thousands of patients that have gone through this, and we've gotten great results from them. And it's not only rewarding to the patient, but it's also rewarding to us. We see such great results as therapists, and it keeps us going too.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being our guest. Could you end maybe on the note of sharing your contact information with our
Yes.
audience?
So if you are interested in participating with Safe Strides, our phone number is 708-442-6420. They can get you in touch with one of our liaisons. Our home health liaisons do go from that phone call. They do contact with your doctor and set up a visit. If you haven't seen your doctor in a while, they'll go ahead and set up a visit for you so that you can actually see your doctor, have the doctor see how you're doing before maybe even sending the order. I think that's great. I keep touching upon this, but the key is that, go see your doctor. It's all about seeing your doctor. If you haven't seen them for a while, there are a lot of people that we do see, unfortunately, that they haven't seen their doctor in a long time. So this is a great conversation starter for that.
And I understood from your liaisons, you work with a lot of veterans.
Yes.
So that's something for them to consider when they're getting home care, is to ask for Kindred at
Absolutely.
home. Mhm.
Absolutely.
Very good. Now, Leah just went to the website. Could you give that website out?
So our website is www.kindredathome.com. You would go ahead and surf through that website, and they should have some material there on what Safe Strides is. So, if you're more of a visual person, that's probably the way to go.
Nice. Thank you, Noah.